Good afternoon, good morning, everyone who is participating in this webinar on promoting the availability of standards and technical barrier to trade information in Africa for the implementation of the AFCFTA. Those who don't know what is AFCFTA is Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Opportunities and challenges. Yeah, this is a webinar organized by African Organization for Standardization. I am Dr. Hermogene Senkimana, Secretary General of African Organization for Standardization. I will be chairing this session and moderating this session. Thank you for joining us. We are on this Zoom platform, but we are also live on Facebook. Yeah. Today, we have different panelists from governments, from private sector, and actually from experts that deal with information sharing on standard and TBTs. Why this seminar today? The main objective of this seminar is to share the information on different platforms that exist either on the continent, either at national level and international level, and to see how we can improve the accessibility of information on TBT. This will enhance closer cooperation and partnership among different stakeholders, which are the African Union member states and private sector that actually are the ones that are being affected when this information is not availed effectively. We need to discuss this subject because in January 2021, we will start the implementation of the AFCFTA. That's actually the biggest challenge of our continent, where so many of our industry, of our traders will be looking what exists, which standards are being used in one country, why these standards are different, why the SPS measures are different, why this technical regulation is not equivalent to the other technical regulation. To deal with this issue, we should start discussing what should be done. We have different experienced experts that I would like to present to you as they present. Without taking much of your time, our first expert is Brian. Is Brian, who is an expert in the Department of Trade and Industry at the African Union Commission. He is knowledgeable in trade policy issues, as he had done a master's program of trade law and policy at University of Cape Town, and he is also dealing with trade matters at the African Union level. Brian Murevu, this is now your platform. Can you present to us on the Trade Observatory at the African Union? Brian, we're gonna upload your presentation shortly. To all participants, we have interpretation available. We have interpretation available in French and English. Brian, we are yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General. Thank you, colleagues. Good afternoon. My name is Brian from the Department of Trade and Industry at the African Union Commission, and I'm here to give you a 5-minute presentation on the work we are doing on the Africa Trade Observatory. Colleagues behind the scenes, can you kindly share the screen? So the African Trade Observatory is a joint project that we are implementing with the International Trade Center with the support from the European Union. It is a culmination of a decision that was taken way back in 2012. Next slide, in terms of how best can we move this process in ensuring that we boost intra-Africa trade. So basically, the presentation layout is on your screen, but more importantly, I'll focus on two things, namely, where do we draw the mandate as the African Union to embark on such an ambitious initiative? And then secondly, what is the Trade Observatory all about, and how do we loop it in to the theme of this session in terms of TBT and SPS, and as well as non-tariff barriers? Next slide, please. So there was a summit decision, we call it, it's actually a famous decision, we call it Summit Decision 394, which relates to boosting intra-Africa trade. This decision was made in 2012. Essentially, it called for the acceleration of the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area, with basically anchored on 7 clusters, which I'll highlight. But in that, it called for a support from partners to support the process towards boosting intra-Africa trade, as well as the establishment of the African Free Trade Area, which we have witnessed in the past few days, that the process gathered momentum, and the start of trading is scheduled for 1 January 2021. And then, but of course, it had to come with some kind of a coordination mechanism between partners, member states, regional economic communities, and more recently, the AFCFTA Secretariat. So I'll give you a brief rundown of what is it about this boosting inter-Africa trade action plan? What is it the BIAT is all about? What are the clusters that are implied, and how are we teasing them out in terms of what is it is of immediate priority? Next slide, please. So BIAT is anchored on 7 clusters. Next slide. And these clusters are trade policy. On trade policy there, you will notice that there is the establishment of the AFCFTA. So the BIAT is the mother document. So the AFCFTA is one of those projects which you can tease out from BIAT action plan. And of course, we have the implementation mechanisms within the existing regs. And of cluster number 2 is the productive capacity, because once we create an FTA, you then need a mechanism in which you trade with the goods that you produce among yourselves. And of course, we are aware that Africa is home to so many SMEs, so we again have to find a way in which we can bring them on board. And of course, there are other flanking instruments such as the Africa Industrial Development Action Plan, the Africa Mining Vision, the Comprehensive Agriculture Africa Development Program, CADIP. And the third cluster is trade facilitation, which has to do with the movement of goods across borders in terms of customs, transit, and border management. Next slide. And then we have the trade-related infrastructure, because we are conscious that Africa, there's infrastructure deficiencies, and of course the logistics in terms of how then do you move those goods from one country to the next. And then we have the factor market integration. This has to do with the movement of people and capital. Trade finance, this is very important. And we have work program on this one in terms of how do we move and support. Trade finance comes in to support the implementation of the AFCFTA. And then coming lastly to the trade information cluster. This is very important, because then it gives us how then do you share the information in terms of the markets that are available. So we have the networks of trade promotion agencies, we have the intra-Africa trade fair, and then finally we have the Africa Trade Observatory. Next slide. So the Africa Trade Observatory, which is the main thrust of this presentation, basically is anchored on 5 items. 1, to provide qualitative and quantitative trade and trade-related information. So in other words, this is your one-stop shop of all the information regarding trade information in Africa. It also analyzes trade and trade-related information. So in other words, behind the scene, we do the analysis. And then, of course, it comes with the database where you can extract information for your own use, for policy decision, for students, for think tanks. And then, of course, there is a monitoring aspect, because once you create an ARSO, you then need to understand how countries are utilizing the existing preferences. And then finally, it provides all the information to the private sector, because the private sector are the traders. This instrument which we have created, which will be implemented in January, is anchored on the private sector. So in the interim, next slide, what have we done? To create such a system, it is anchored on 3 modules: the explore module, the compare module, and the monitor module. The first 2 are publicly, in fact, will be publicly available. The last one is restricted because this one has to do with the policymakers, the chief executive officers of regional economic communities, and the focal points in the member states. So what does the explore module contain? It contains information which you can use to compare trade market information, products, countries, and markets. This includes market opportunities. So essentially, you have the whole package market intelligence under the explore module. And then the compare module, which will provide you a detailed trade market information by product. So in other words, it's a country product combination. And then finally, we have the monitor module, which we then use to report back to our principals how well we are doing in terms of the implementation of the AFCFTA. And then finally, behind the scene as well, we have worked out a communication plan. How do we make these 2 available to the public? So we are aware that because of COVID, people are locked away at homes. So we have created some kind of a sensitization process where people can access these modules on YouTube. And I sort of like have a feel of what the Africa Trade Observatory is all about. Next slide, please. So the 4 modules, the Africa Trade Observatory, the information is publicly available. These are 5 minutes videos where you can access them and at the comfort of your homes. Thank you, Sir General.
Brian, thank you very much for respecting the time, and thank you for the good presentation. I would like to know, I saw the modules, market intelligence, like the explore module, and you have the compare module where you have country knowledge. What really does it mean for this observatory, for a private sector point of view, and linking to intra-Africa trade? How really this observatory will help the private sector? Thank you, Brian. What are your views on that?
Thank you, Secretary General. So essentially, this tool is designed to assist the private sector to identify export and import opportunities. So in other words, where you're seated in Nairobi, you are able to access the price of the market price of palm oil in Egypt, and what are the SPS requirements, and what are the potential NTBs you might face in the process. And in so doing, you are able to do some kind of a continent-wide scan to identify where your product can go. So this gives you a fair view. So unlike in the previous period where the market information which was available to African member states was purely outside Africa and probably provided by non-Africans as well, we have taken the initiative to do it ourselves, to come up with a homegrown situation where we sort of like, we give you all the information because we are aware of the terrain which Africa is operating. So once private sector is aware of the continent-wide opportunities, they are able to tap in. And by the way, the Trade Observatory has a business directory. So each country, you notice that once you go, when these modules are made public in the next 3 weeks, you are able to see the business directory in each country, and then you can do some kind of a partnership arrangement regarding the specific sector or product that you want to access, and what are the requirements, and what are the government focal points which you might want to knock the door and have the information provided to you. So we think that once market information is provided, we are able to drive the process forward and boost intra-Africa trade. Thank you, Secretary General.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for the clarification. Yeah. I urge the participant to use the chat platform for the question that we will take at the end of our presentation. Thank you very much, Brian. Our next presenter is Sarah Irar, who is from the WTO. She has a bachelor degree in economics. Sorry for the slide. They put Edem is not Edem, is Sarah Irar. She had this bachelor degree in the USA and master's degree in international relations from Johns Hopkins University. She's currently a counselor in the Trade and Environment Division of the WTO. Focusing mainly on TBT issues and transparency issues. She will be presenting to us on the WTBT agreement, transparency framework and tools, mainly on EPING, how EPING can help track evolving product requirements and engage with public-private stakeholders in addressing trade concern. Sarah, the platform is yours. Thank you very much. Sarah? Sarah, are you there?
Okay. Okay, do you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly now. Thank you.
Okay, apologies for the delay. And I'd like to first of all thank ARSO for the invitation to join this webinar with a lot of interesting presentations regarding regulatory information and how to make it more accessible to a wider public. Now, the scope of what I have to present is more limited, of course, than what just came before me, because the focus of what I will do is focus mainly on technical regulations and standards. But as the African continent is moving towards, and there's a huge momentum towards further integration, I believe that there's room to benefit from what is already happening at the multilateral level and use that as a stepping stone. Now, maybe we can go to the next slide, please. Hello? Yes, I'll start with some facts and figures. Now, under the WTO TBT agreement, members are required to submit notifications to other members through the WTO whenever they have new regulations coming up. And ideally, they do so when the regulation is still in draft form, except in urgent circumstances. And as you can see in this graph, there's an increasing number of notifications that we have been receiving at the WTO from around the world. And last year, for which we have full figures, we had more than 3,300 notifications coming through of technical regulations. And interestingly, African WTO members submitted over a third of all these notifications. Uganda was #1, and Kenya and Tanzania were among the top 10. So what is the message here? African members are already participating and sharing information at the global level very successfully. And so it would be great to keep using this notification system to inform each other at the continental level and at the international level of evolving regulations. So this is really not about the stock of regulations, but the flow, what is coming your way. And as you know, there's a lot of regulatory activity everywhere, both for moving towards harmonization, but also due to environmental concerns, other public policy concerns. There's a lot of regulatory activity. Now, the challenge has become, with the thousands of notifications coming through, how do you track these and how can you make best use of this information coming from your neighbors and from other parts of the world? And this is where EPIN can help. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So EPIN is basically has a number of functions that I'd like to share with you, more like a general overview as there's no time to explain in detail. But first and foremost, anyone can register and receive updates on all these regulatory changes that are coming up. So it could be an SME, a government official, a standardizing body. So you sign up depending on your interest in terms of markets and products, and you can receive daily or weekly alerts on what's happening. This is being kept up to date. And also, as I said, since notifications allow for a 60-day comment period, it's important to be able to find out about these changes in time in case you have questions or comments. You can use the system to search past notifications, and EPIN is also a communication platform. Inquiry points, which also play a very important role under the SPS and TBT agreements, can actually have advanced rights to, for example, reach out to their national stakeholders through the system. And more recently, we're piloting a new feature which could be of interest to the region. And for now, we call it the admin chat. What it does is inquiry points and other officials from WTO members which work on TBT issues can actually connect with each other in private conversations. And actually, this was a request that came from a couple of regions which said, well, there's the national forum in EPIN and international, but we lack an opportunity to discuss at a regional level. And hence, we have started piloting. We've reached out to the CARICOM region in Caribbean. And in Africa, we reached out to some officials from the East African community to see if this could be of interest to them. But it's basically open how many inquiry points come together and what they discuss. It could be discussing notifications, raising issues in the committee, or regional issues. And just lastly to say, we have around 12,000 users now, and about 1/5 are from Africa. So Africans are already using the system. And of course, if we can move to the next slide, please. One of the points of receiving these notifications is, of course, that under the TBT agreement, members have a right to question other members in terms of their upcoming regulations, ask questions, justifications, and maybe sometimes raise concerns in the TBT committee or the SPS committee. And just to say, despite the pandemic, we've been continuing work in the TBT committee. And just at the end of October, we had what we call now a hybrid meeting with attendance physically and from all around the world using online methods. And we saw the discussion of 77 specific trade concerns, and many of them referring back to these notifications, which you can get through EPIN. And for now, there were no SDCs raised by African members, but I can imagine that as Africa integrates at the continental level, but also integrates more fully with the international economy, there'll be an interest to participate actively in the committee to defend, let's say, export interests for something made in Africa. So and with the hybrid options we have now, and I'm not sure we will ever remove ourselves from that, there'll be more opportunities for capital-based officials to attend, even if they're not physically in Geneva. And lastly, if I can move to the next slide, please, to conclude with a few points on this regional international nexus. So the procedures and tools operating at the multi can support regional integration and advancement. And for example, EPIN can help African state parties to track evolution of African and international product requirements, connect with public and private stakeholders, monitor regulatory harmonization at the regional level, continental level, international level, and also help defend their export interests. I think I'll stop there and see if there are questions.
Sarah, thank you very much. I see that the notification have been increasing since 1995. And I am really happy that at least, as you said, 1/3 of the notification came from Africa. And what are your view? Maybe I see the East Africa, you noted Uganda being the first, and Kenya and Tanzania being the top 10. And you have these a national forum that the inquiry point are discussing, and at international level. And you have introduced another key tool, the admin chat. What are your view that you have the East Africa community having more the notification? Is it linked to the trade within the region? Is it linked to the effectiveness of the inquiry point? What are your view on that?
No, thank you for the interesting question. I think the answer probably lies in the region itself. I can only speculate from afar, but I think it's a combination of things. I think, first of all, there has been quite some regulatory efforts for regulatory harmonization in EAC. And I think they've been very transparent about that. And they've been notifying all their regulatory activity, maybe both at the national level and whenever there's been a regional push. I think it's become more systematic. And of course, individuals matter a lot. You have institutions in place, rules in place, but you need the individuals to implement. And we do have a couple of champions from the region who have, I think, taken on this challenge to do a systematic job of being transparent and motivating in each other. And in fact, when we went once to the region for an EPING seminar, it was revealed some members were falling a bit behind than others. And in fact, then we had many more member states from the region come on board. I think it's been a great dynamic from the region. Of course, we are willing to provide technical assistance to broaden that to other parts of Africa. But I think I would say regulatory activity and technical assistance, and most importantly, individuals. And here, for example, we have George Opio from Uganda, who's actually a trainer and mentor for a lot of other countries in Africa and beyond.
Do you think we can leverage on that experience during the AFCFTA implementation?
Mm-hmm. No, I think that, for example, you will want to monitor the path towards harmonization in Africa. And the notifications that come through the WTO could be a way of monitoring that and discussing that at the regional level, rather than creating yet another system for alerting each other of your changes. So I think it would definitely be, it could serve as an existing tool for efficient sharing of information and updates. And so that's more for submitting of notifications and updating each other regionally, continentally, internationally, but also possibly, if there's interest, what we call the admin chat for now, could be a way for officials to connect with each other and discuss issues related to the TBT agreement and notifications in a more private setting, to then maybe reach out to those in other regions or the committee. And lastly, to say, of course, ARSO is also an observer in the TBT committee, and ARSO can also be sort of an institution to communicate what's happening in Africa to the committee and vice versa. And I think I'll stop there. Hello? I can't hear.
We seem to have lost him.
Okore is the acting director in charge of standardization. Then Joyce Okore is the next presenter. Yes. Yeah, she's the acting director in charge of standard in Gardner Standard Authority. And she holds a master's in business management. Yeah, she's well experienced. She's using the Africa Trade Web Portal. It's good to have you, Joyce Okore, and the platform is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for the introduction. And indeed, I'm Joyce Okore, like you said, and I'm here to present on basically asymmetric information on TBT in Africa, the potential role of ARSO, Africa Trade Web Portal, as a powerhouse. If you could kindly share this. Yes. Thank you. So the next slide, please. So I have a quick outline on the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're looking at asymmetric information on trade in Africa, and you could see it as widespread. And we noticed that Africa really has two sides. I mean, markets have two sides. It's the buyer or the seller. And you need information to allow for smooth business. Now, a gap in information where one party has more information or better information than the other results in asymmetric information. And you could see it in even the standards that we have now. Some have national standards that are not well harmonized in the region. So we don't have equal information, which is causing economic imbalances. And this would ultimately result in economic weaknesses and potentially lead to market failure. Hence the need for information system, that's the ASO DISNet, which is available for all of us. Next slide, please. Now, basically, these are the functions of the ASO DISNet. And the key ones would be the principles, rules, and common methodology and procedures for information processing and exchange. And then it provides guidelines on application of new information technologies and new information on products. And it facilitates collection, processing, and exchange of information on standards, conformity assessment, and related issues in Africa. And with all this information, hopefully it should reduce the time devoted to the search for information, amongst others. Next slide, please. So this is the structure of the DISNet. It's basically 8 different levels, from the General Assembly all the way to the Africa Trade Help Desk, managing the whole process of the DISNet. Next slide, please. So then the ASO Trade Web Portal. So trade information is critical to the exchange of goods and services across borders, as price and quality differentials must be sufficient to offset the cost in terms of time and transport. ASO formulated ASO DISNet in order to respond to the post-millennium technological advancement in the exchange of information. And the African Trade Web Portal is a tool to aid trade activities among African countries through international information systems, which will provide global knowledge on trade-related issues and ways in which to facilitate free flow of goods due to the ability of provided information and systems to create an information-driven society. So modern trade information systems around the world, such as Asso Trade Web Portal, provides importers, exporters, retailers, and investors with up-to-date and profit-making knowledge that helps grease the wheels of globalization. Next, please. So this is an important slide where we all agree that it's one of the obligations that we have signed to the Transparency Agreement under the TBT Annex 6. So this is this portal provides exporters in African countries to see. Well, can you open up a bit? Domestic and international markets with appropriate market and product technological related information. The slides are not too clear from here. Okay. The slide is not too clear from here. So it provides information on the need to meet, demonstrate compliance with quality standards, buyer requirements, trade regulations, tariffs, and non-tariff barriers. Creates an electronic African trade information data, facts and figures within the complex, increasingly global supply chains, and filtering information to provide producers, growers, manufacturers, SMEs, and other supply chain participants information on market requirements with which their products must comply in different participating ARSO member states and regs. Next slide, please. So this is just a pictorial of the ARSO Trade Web Portal and what it seeks to facilitate. So you have access to key inputs, information, then the regulatory barriers. So transportation cost comes in here. And then once you have information on trade policies and procedures, it feeds into border crossing. So once you have the relevant information, there's free movement of goods and services. And then you have the distribution services, transportation. So in looking at it holistically, there should be free flow of information, free flow of, that will lead to free flow of products, services across the region. Next slide, please. Okay, so the data sets defined in the ARSO Trade Web Portal. We'll look at the product and its harmonization system. Do we have that in place? Do all products have the requisite harmonized HS code, to put it briefly? And then our standards, the technical regulations available for products, do we have them? Are standards not conflicting at the moment? Are we thoroughly harmonized them in the region? And are they available on the portal for all of us to have a look at? And then we go down into the grain quality in the country, capacity in terms of weight. Is a 25 kilo bag the same in all countries? Same with other weights and measures, basically. So we look at the equivalent, conflicting, parallel, national or regional standards, which I've mentioned earlier. We seem to have our national standards still on our shelves, where we should actually be looking at picking our regional standards and begin implementing them as our national standards. And I don't think that is being done thoroughly across the region. Same with the testing procedures. Are we harmonized on testing procedures? Do we know what countries are using? Are we sharing these information out there so that we know the status of testing in all countries and whether we can harmonize? If we are all going by the 17025, is that information available to help, respect each other's testing and protocols? Same with the SPS issues. Do we have conflicting information, or This is also available out there for use. Now we have various schemes, including the product certification scheme. We have the system certification scheme. Are they harmonized within the region? We will need to share that information across to make trade very easy and facilitate trade across the region. Because one scheme in Ghana, for example, should not conflict with that in Kenya. And if we're going by the ISO standard, once it's adopted, I think we should be able to harmonize that standard in the region, and it facilitates our processes. Then the entry point inspection, do we have that information out there? We need to know the requirements of every region to be able to align with and basically harmonize. Same with duration of inspection. So do we have a protocol indicating how much time is needed for inspection at the border? And if you even have a mutual agreement regarding your products, this would actually reduce the time we spend at inspection for inspection. So this information should be shared across the region, and that should be made available readily. Then administrative barriers, that is also a very important barrier which could create a lot of problems if these issues are not ironed out. We need to make sure that we align and make sure that things are simple for SMEs, exporters to be able to send their goods across by having information readily available so that the compliance is easy. And then the eco-labeling, are we all going to go by these requirements? Once you're certified to the eco mark, you know that your goods can flow throughout the region. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Hello, next slide, please. Okay, so then we move on to the benefits of the ASO Trade Web Portal. So with all this information available, where the first would be reduction in trade costs. You have information, so once you have the wealth of information, you know that your processes will be streamlined and this would feed into your trade, the cost. Once you have information and it's readily available, there's no, hello. Once information is available, you have a reduction in trade costs because you will not spend time doing the wrong thing and having to rework. There's increase in competitiveness of firms. There's information available. You know what happens, what is going to happen in country A or country B. So once you have all that information regarding a particular product or service, you know that you can design your product or formulate a product and get it certified, and that would increase its chances in the market. Then you have improved export performance. That is linked to information. Once you have information on your exporting country, you can get your products to conform to the requirements of, the harmonized standard. And with information also, you have more trade can create jobs and income.
Joyce, 1 minute, Joyce.
Yes, and then that will lead to economic growth and then obviously poverty reduction. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So NSBs as an engine for the ASO Trade Web Portal. So here we can talk about the NSB's information with ASO.NET members. We have all this information out there on standards, conformity assessment, TRs, etc. And then the NSBs are encouraged to have catalogs. Online catalogs makes it easy to search for standards, etc. And then awareness by members, promoting the service of ASO.NET throughout the region. product information that ARSO design members shall designate officers to input data in the web portal and continuously updating the portal. And the NSBs, through their national inquiry point, shall assist all interested parties with inquiries on standards, regulations, and trade to boost inter-African trade. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the NSB as the engine for the ARSO trade web portal. Next slide, please. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Joyce Okore, for your presentation. I see that the Africa Trade Web Portal within ARSO is linked to the HS code. And you have also displayed a slide with the data sets, almost 11 data sets, including the technical regulation linked to that product or SPS measures. Is it also certified? What do you see as you have been using this Africa Trade Web Portal? What do you see as a challenge in using this trade portal among ARSO members? What would you advise in overcoming the challenge and the utilization of the Africa Trade Web Portal?
Yes, thank you. So I think that when you look at the slide, basically it's information, that is the standards, technical regulations, even conformity assessment procedures. I don't think that we have harmonized extensively. So we have this conflicting issues with your national standard versus what is out there in ASO. So I think that's a major, we should be able to harmonize our standards as far as possible and pick the ASO document as our national standard. So you go in there, you see a standard, and it's a standard you could apply, you know, but people begin to have conflicting decisions, whether to take up the national standard or the ASO standard. And even within the technical committees here, when you are planning on reviewing the ASO standard that has even been brought forward, you realize there's a lot of conflicting issues. And I think we need to look at that critically. If this should be a success, we should make sure that we harmonize thoroughly, and it should be fast. To take it shortly, I mean, it should be fast in the sense that I don't think that we have harmonized extensively. There are still a lot of standards that we need to quickly harmonize, get our national standards off our shelves and put the ASO document out there. And that should be made available to importers, exporters, so that they know this is the document we're going to go by regionally. And obviously, once this is drummed down, we should have very little resistance, very little conflict. And we all agree that Africa is a big market. We have so much to gain if we go by the regional standard. So for us here, we think that the process has been a bit slow. We should look at our unique products, get the standards available, harmonize, let these standards go out there to our stakeholders, engage them through workshops, training, and make these standards user-friendly, if in the forms of pictorials, you know, just be innovative to get the information out there. And I think that is really lacking. You know, not to talk about the fact that we have poor internet connectivity, and even going out there is going to be a problem. Trying to access information is really a challenge. You know, for us here, we have the National Board for Small Scale Industries, and they have a unit on advocacy. And this unit is scattered around the country. So we are hoping that we will be able to give that information to the headquarters and that will be disseminated, and SMEs within the region, remote areas, should be able to get little information, you know, to guide their processes. Because if we have production way in the hinterland, it's not in the capital, see. So I think that we should be innovative to come up with various ways to get information out there, and not just in the cities. Production is taking place in hinterland, and how do we package this information, get it out there, and make them user-friendly? So we here are thinking of using the National Board for Small Scale Industry, and this could be replicated because they deal mainly with all the SMEs. And you have the Ghana Export Promotion Authority taking leadership in providing information to the SMEs. So I think this should cut across with all inspection procedures, certification schemes. Harmonization should be done, and done fast, quickly, to cover at least 60–70% of what we're doing now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you very much. Harmonization and varying the standard, the harmonized standard to the private sector. That is key. Using all different means that the users of those standards get to know what are in the standards, get to know the technical regulation, and so on. We are now reaching actually that level where we have the private sector with us. The Dr. Adam Odzegonu, who will be discussing on the making trade count among African countries, the role of Afro Champions Initiative and the impact of availing standard and technical regulation information to the private sector and the SMEs for increased market access. Dr. Adam is the co-chair of Afro Champions, which is an initiative that's gathered the private sector and advise the government. And he has a very rich experience, as you can see, in negotiating on behalf of government, on the behalf of the private sector, all over the world, not only in Africa, but in Europe, in North America, and elsewhere. Dr. Adam, the platform is yours. Thank you. You can unmute, please. Thank you. Unmute. Dan, yes, yes.
No, sorry, it kept saying that the host is not allowing me to unmute. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Well, thanks, SG and Chairman, for this unique occasion. And I will, for the sake of time, dive straight into my presentation. I listened with great intent to the previous speakers, and particularly my sister, who just spoke about the need for harmonization and the need for uptake from the small private sector networks and interlinks, which matter. And by this, I'm talking about the SMEs, who account for 80% of employment in Africa. So we are approaching standards and digitization of standards from a completely private sector-led approach. Afro Champions, as you already mentioned, is a public-private partnership with African Union and other multi-stakeholder organizations as partners. And we've been trying to demonstrate how private sector has a lot of technical capacity that could be brought to bear on some of the policy dynamics that would make it possible for the private sector to grow bigger and become the engine that is supposed to be for the growth development of the continent, economic growth development of the continent. So during the COVID epidemic, we realized that there was a need to rather accelerate the value that the private sector, particularly the SMEs, have, so they don't get lost and forgotten about in the atmosphere of all of the challenges going on with supply chains being disrupted, among others. Now, we see the African Continental Free Trade Area has been very, very key and strategic for driving that growth we talked about. So we came up with an initiative that was presented to the African Union, senior trade officers, trade negotiators, and eventually to the ministers of trade, called AVRIVA. So AVRIVA basically is the accelerating the virtual resilience for integrating a vibrant Africa. So that's what the acronym means. And AVRIVA has 4 components, so I'll go over them very quickly. So one is the virtual diplomacy platform, which we thought was going to be very important to keep the trade negotiations going and ensuring that all of the barriers to making sure that we can have a smooth negotiations can take place. So cybersecurity, concerns about what do you call it? About the security breaches, lack of comfort on being able to sit on screen, language, interpretation, among others. So working with the African Union, we've been able to provide some support in that regard. The next thing that was important was, of course, I mentioned about cybersecurity, which again becomes a major issue for how a lot of these things we want to do, which involve data that have to go online and be used virtually, how we are protecting and creating the right protocols to protect this data. Then there is the trusted travel mechanism that we developed in partnership with the Africa Center for Disease Control, because we thought that trade is all about movement of people and goods. And to the point that we're suffering from lockdowns, to the point that countries were putting different restrictions for entry and exit, test requirements, among others. For a continent with 55 fragmented countries, there was a need to create a trusted mechanism where tests done in one country can be validated by another, and also where restrictions in one country, whether it's PCR tests, whether it's whatever, you know, how many days or hours you're supposed to take the test before travel. All of these things are programmatized into technology software that Africa CDC can now offer to countries as a public good for countries to integrate. I'm happy to say that quite a number of airlines are currently integrating in labs, and hopefully we should be able to have a smoother way in which, and smart, safe, and smooth way in which people are able to travel. But now I want to go into the component of AVRIVA, which reflects more to the discussion we're having now, which is the AFCFTA link or AFCFTA link. And I'll now request that we move to the next slide. So the AFCFTA link is the, and again, these were developed with the Sankore Institute, which is Afro Champion's thought leadership organ dedicated to the CFTA implementation on behalf of the private sector that we represent. And I'm happy to mention that ASO is also one of our Afro Champion stakeholders. So the AFCFTA link for us is a standards passport that brings a system of interoperability to the level of SMEs. So we are approaching it right from the SME standpoint. What are the things that SMEs engage with? Most of them are not people who are registered businesses, or even if they are not using the official normal channels to do their businesses. They've created all kinds of WhatsApp groups where they are selling, or they are promoting or advertising most of the things that they do. So you're not going to find them in the official advertising registries. So the business registries that we've developed, the kind of legal supports they are getting, some of these things are just done over the telephone. The kind of regulatory support they tend to get. We feel that the kind of business registry that interlinks all of these, what we call interlinks all of these very, very small setups that exist outside of the normal formal sector is going to be very key to drive the uptake that we're talking about. Next slide, please. Now, as we know, standards, it costs so much money, you know, to just get standards, you know, registering products, to be able to get the massive information that we just saw on the web portal. How do we break these things down and distill them? And then if these peanut sellers, cashew sellers who are adding value and producing all of these things, ensuring that they're able to get become visible, not only to banks, but also visible to the standards organization. And when they finally do get the money to be able to register and get the certification for their product, then they stand a chance of having to do it in many other countries, multiple countries, when they want to move their products to those countries. So we feel that a cross-border, digital highway is very key to this cross-border standards passporting. And therefore, the mechanism we've built, or the system we've built, which is linked to the business registries and linked to the profile of these SMEs and the day-to-day activities, which keeps getting enriched based on who within their networks they keep working with. It enriches the profile to the point where we're able to get enough information to passport to other, update their profiles on whatever they're doing. So you think of it like a LinkedIn for SMEs. And so if I'm producing peanut butter and there's information about opportunities in Botswana, and I'm in Ghana, and Botswana needs that, I should be able to get that information in real time. Who needs it? Where's the opportunity? How much? Who are the lawyers I could consult in that area? How do I even get to register? Or what would require for me to be able to export? And then you come also to the standards information. So in this sense, standards is not isolated from all the other business services that they do. Next slide, please. We're saying that standards harmonization should be about the small guy and the small firm. If we don't get standards distilled and processed to the level where the ordinary guy on the street who is really, really producing on the farm, who is adding value in his little shop, and creating very small setups of industrial value addition. And if they are not able to get and understand the need for standards, there's a lot of education underway, by the way, but the only way to make them actively involved in this process is that they see business opportunities linked to it. And that's where we are creating the interlink to show them exactly where the business opportunities are. And then there's an incentive for them to register and also to begin to look at how to register, to get their products into other countries. Now, this passport mechanism also makes it easy for them now through a convertible algorithm, because if the countries have not already agreed on standards, that they can passport, through the algorithm that we built and inputted into the system, it will convert that to the countries that they are going to. So that makes the work actually much easier for the countries that would like to send their products. Next slide, please. So this is the highway for us in terms of the CFTA link. So we've got a technological backbone, the smart interoperability that will be able to connect to the private sector dashboard, that will connect to the Africa Trade Observatory, to be able to connect to the ARSO dashboard or the ARSO registry, but using the Pan-African ecosystem that we have. And of course, like I said earlier, there's so many activities that are going on: letters of credit, opening accounts, business certification, mobile money transactions, a lot of transactions that are taking place on mobile. All of these things, again, if not linked to standards, make it very difficult, because most of them will just try to figure out how to do business and avoid having to go through another process that creates another layer of complexity to what they're doing already. So that's how these things are embedded. Continental trade, we're saying infrastructure for SMEs is not just payments. It's also about systems. Next slide, please. Or I believe the final slide. Yes. So thank you very much. I just wanted to be brief, and I hope I've been cogently brief enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my brother Edem. I like the way you say that the standard harmonization it should link to the small guys. Yeah, the small guys, the small farms, because those are the ones actually that are bringing in the tax in the different countries. Those are the ones doing the business. With the digital trade highway that you presented and the standard passport, how do we reach out to these small guys? Looking at these small guys, we are now talking English, French, Portuguese, Arabic. How do we reach out and tell them the content of standards and what they require and improve their business, linking to this standard passport? Thank you.
Well, thank you. The miracle we find now is that most of these traders realize that they will not be in business without having access to a cell phone. The ability to be able to reach, advertise, to promote, to be accessible and affordable, it's all depending on the ability to communicate on cell phones. And by communication, it's not just by text message, but also by voice message. It's also be able to do video calls. They're also doing a lot of their payments through mobile money. And the numbers continue to grow. So how our system has taken advantage of the African multinationals that are part of our network and create IDs, creating IDs for all of these SMEs linked to what we are calling their CFTA profile. And we then begin to populate, so all the transactions they keep doing, the algorithm begins to learn their transactions and understand what their needs are going to be. So anything to do with certifications, registrations, audits, approvals, GMP seals, which are extremely going to be very important, training records, all of these things create an atmosphere in which, or the desire and the need for them to be able to open up and sell into other markets forces them now to have to pay attention to these things in ways that normally they wouldn't have paid attention to. Because if the standards require that for you to be able to, or the regulations require that for you to be able to make more money selling into another market, you need those standards. They'll find a standard. So the key is to tie it into an incentive structure that grows their business. Without that, they'll find the people to interpret these things to them. But when we make it just a mechanism by which we define the world for them and we want them to come and fit in, they'll figure out how to exist and operate without having to create a layer of complexity, requiring them to have to learn new things that they're not used to already. So that's the approach we adopt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, as you said, utilizing what they use, they have cell phones. How do we create applications probably or on all these platforms that we are talking about to be accessible to the users? Probably have those applications in different languages, and they can access those information or build the capacity for the auditors and the evaluators that we have on the continent. I think really using the digital platform, it's gonna be very, very, very helpful, as you said, because they also need money, and if the standards are there to help them get the money, I think they can really use the money and the other platform available. Thank you very much. We have reached out to different countries, members of African Organization for Standardization from North, West, East, and Southern Africa, to feel how really we can reach out to the small guys on the standard. The first presenter will be from Egypt, Organization for Standard, Eman Mohamed Nazir. She will be presenting us on the experience making standard available for the producers, those small guys, and helping them to be certified. What is the role of the Egypt Organization for Standardization in this case? Mrs. Eman, yeah, you have the platform. Thank you. You can unmute, please unmute. Okay. Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your invitation. It's a pleasure to join this webinar. I represent Egyptian Organization for Standards and Quality in Egypt. In this presentation, we will talk about how the Egyptian Organization, or EOS, is participating or facilitating the access process to the information that help the investors or SMEs to help in to improve the investment all over. This is a small or brief for Egyptian Organization. It's the only national and competent body in Egypt affiliated for undertaking the relevant activities of preparing and issuing Egyptian standards, as well as the different activities in the field of quality assurance and conformity assessment for the relevant products, testing, and industrial calibration, aiming to assure the quality and safety of the Egyptian products presented in the Egyptian market, seeking consumer and environment's protection. Besides, Egypt is representing in the international and regional organizations in the fields of standardization and quality-related activities, as well as EOS is hosting WTO TBT inquiry points in Egypt, as it receives the inquiries that comes from the participating bodies and sending it to the relevant internally to the relevant technical departments, or externally for the relevant institutes. Next slide, please. EOS is introducing for its stakeholders many facilities through its official website, www.eos.org.eg. It's an active link actually, so we can visit the website from here for the interested one who can visit. First of all, we're going to talk about the standards field. Egyptian Organization for Standards is selling the Egyptian standards and ISO standards electronically. The user or the client can search the website for the Egyptian standards by name or by number, and so they can also use the Egyptian standardization for the ISO search too, and they can buy the ISO standards. We are selling the Egyptian standards catalog in different sectors electronically, food sector, engineering, or chemical, or textile. Publishing free full version of textile face masks as an essential need in this case of COVID-19. So many factories are coming now are in a deep need, okay, for manufacturing these masks. Also, we represent a database for the ministerial decrees regarding the Egyptian standards. Next slide, please. In the quality of and certification field, facilitates access for EOS stakeholders and clients to revise and get information about companies that have Egyptian quality and halal marks, companies that have Egyptian conformity certificates, registry for quality management systems, certifications bodies, and certified entities with clarifying the procedures of registration. This is so helpful, of course, for the private sector to make sure that they have the qualified entities that give the certifications. About the awareness and information field, publishing an electronic version of the EOS magazine issued every 2 months. It includes many topics like for food or for industry, for environment, or for technology, and it has also the latest events that EOS related in or shared, participated in. Publishing electronic version of EOS Codex Bulletin issued quarterly, and EOS news and events regularly updated on this website. Information about specialized training courses offered by EOS. EOS is offering 2 specialized training courses. We have updated schedule on this website about the offered training courses. So anyone want to participate in it, you can just view the schedule of the courses and choose any one of them. Answering the clients' inquiries that come through the website. Some users or clients can inquire about a specific standard, if it is still available or withdrawn, or about a certificate. They can use the website to inquire about anything related to the standards and the quality process. Next slide, please. Latest EOS automated electronic services. Later, we introduced electronic services that the client can register online for it on the MTI or the Ministry of Industry, Trade and the Trade website. He can apply online to get these services: Egyptian conformity certificates or marks, halal mark, registration of international certificates, ISO 9000 or 4001, HASP, etc. Registration of agencies granting international certificates, joining training courses represented by EOS, event participation, and next, please. In the next slide, we can see an active link for like a tutorial guide how the client can register for the required service, like this one. I don't know if we can click on the link. We can. It's an active online link that has an example of the tutorial guide of registering in for or logging in for this online service. It's okay if we can't press on it. Okay. And each service, of course, has its own procedures, and it has its own link that can connect the client online to the ministry website. So he can do the service online. He can fill in his information, and then the technical department will receive his inquiry. Then it will proceed by way or other. Each service has its own procedures. They will check for the certificates, the papers. Then he will, the technical department will reply for the client with the answer if they are accepting these requirements or not. Then he can pay online too from this link. So the whole procedure, the whole service is automatically 100%, even the paying for the service. Then he can receive by email the certificate that he applied for. Thank you for your interest and listening.
Thank you very much, Eman. I like how your AOS adapted to the situation of COVID by going even electronically for such certification. I see. What are the difficulties you are facing really currently, even prior to the electronic system, that now other members can learn from you? What were the challenges, the major challenges, and how you overcome those challenges? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. The most important challenge that we face actually right now, the clients themselves does not react well with the electronic or automated services. Of course, it's a new platform, new procedures. They cannot imagine that they are, once they are inside their homes or inside their companies from their place, they can do these services. So we got many inquiries about how we will, even if we were putting a tutorial guide, but we receive many inquiries about how we pay online, how I can't pay online, I don't have visa, I don't have like that. This is the most challenging problems actually we face now. But by time, I think it will come over. I think the number of inquiries or a problem is reducing by time, not at the first time we used.
I think so many countries will be looking for your contact to follow up on how you did it. I think it's very important while there is a social distancing, while our auditors cannot go and audit physically. I think it's very important to learn from you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I see now how we can reach the small guys once again. From the north, we want to go to East Africa, where Ms. Bahati Samilani will be presenting to us once again similar topic, or what are the experience from the NSB point of view, the role of TBS, Tanzania Bureau of Standard, in this information exchange. Bahati is a National Inquiry Point Officer. She has a huge experience on this inquiry point. Bahati Samilani, the platform is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to represent on how we make available information about standard and standard-related information, and the tool that we used to notify stakeholders and the other WTO member about standard and standard-related information. And then I'll talk about the national inquiry points, what are our responsibilities as national inquiry points, the challenges that we are facing as an information officer, then some recommendation and conclusions. Next slide, please. Introduction one. The introduction slides. Like any other NSB, TBS has a well-equipped library or information center. We nowadays call information center or standard information center, which caters for standard and standard-related information of industries, government, non-government institutions, researchers, academicians, and the business community, importers and exporters. And the function of the library or an information center is first to information retrieval and dissemination, because we have various information. We have information on various standard bodies, various tools that we need to retrieve and disseminate it to the user. We also sell Tanzanian standard, East African standard, and international standard. For this case is ISO standard, because we are ISO member. We offer current awareness service to TBS staff and other stakeholders. Information dissemination to business community through national inquiry point. We offer referral service to other libraries for information that cannot be found in the bureau. Some stakeholders or clients may come and want maybe a standard, maybe for example for chewing gum standard, and that is, we don't have Tanzanian standard, so we'll advise him on which standard to use with the assistant with the technical staff. Then we do general correspondence. We receive inquiries from others, from different stakeholders through email, or someone can come and walk in. So we all respond to those inquiries. And the tools that are available to disseminate standard information, we have online catalog, which is available on website. We have a list of compulsory standard, which is also available on website. And these are the standard that anyone who wants to trade with us must follow. We have list of gazetted standard. We usually compile according to the sector, building, food, whatever. We just compile them, we put the food standards together, building together, and then this gazetted standard are those standards which has been declared by Minister of Industry and Trade. So we also notify that this is the new standard so that the public can know that maybe the certain standard they have using has been withdrawn and there are new standards that are available. We also have TBS Newsletter, which is also available on website. And this one also we publish our finalized list of our finalized standard before being gazetted. Also, we participate in exhibitions where we get the opportunity to market our library as well as our national inquiry points. Like any other NSB, Tanzania has a national inquiry point for TBT, which is located at TBS. And for us, it's just a desk. It's not like it's not like a big office at the moment. It's just a desk. And the function of the national inquiry point is to notify the WTO to notify WTO Secretariat on proposed or adopted standard that might have significant effect on trade through the Minister of Industry and Trade, who is a national notification authority for Tanzania. Then this standard, we notify them at a public comment stage. We assist the industries with standard-related issues and concern. We respond inquiring from other member countries on technical regulation, standard and conformity assessment procedure. We provide relevant documents regarding to technical regulation, standard and conformity assessment procedure. Sometimes when you notify a standard or technical regulation, other WTO member can request for you for a full text. So we provide the full text, whether we have we've sent the notification with a full text or not, but we don't ask you that we have notified, we will provide a full text. For us, it's just to provide the full text. Well, we help domestic industry by providing information about other member standards, technical regulation, and conformity assessment procedures. Awareness creation to stakeholder on the use of EPIN. We know the EPIN is very important, whether we are available as a national inquiry point staff or we are not available, but people should know how to use EPIN and the benefit of using EPIN. So we create awareness and register people who wants to use the EPIN. Then we compile and forward a biannual work program to WTO. This is the standard. And for Tanzania, we have National Notification Authority, who usually forward the notification to WTO, which is Minister of Industry and Trading. Next slide, please. So as a Tanzania, we have some challenges and the opportunity that we can use in accessing the standards. One of the challenges is delay of gazetting standards. So we have a long procedure of gazetting the standard, and before the standard has not been gazetted, that means it has not been declared by the Minister of Industry and Trade, you cannot sell it. So that has been a challenge. It takes time. It takes like 1 year to the standard to be completed. Then it might take even 6 months for standard to be gazetted, and the products are in the market. So this is one of the challenge. Then the technical language used in the standard make it difficult for some SMEs to interpret the standards. Then staff turnover. This makes some standard not to be completed. Then the pricing of standard, and we know all over the world that the standard are not for free. So people will come here and complain that the price is too high. And we try to talk to them, because when developing the standard, you also have to use references. So we also buy standard from other standard body. Then still we are operating manually, that client cannot purchase the standard online, where we have a web store, but it's not yet working. We are still working on it. There's some few things to be done. Then another challenge is internet connectivities. We access some information in electronic, we have electronic information. So sometimes internet has a problem. You cannot, sometimes you want to access EP, sometimes you want to notify. When you access, you say the connection time out, you cannot find the server is not available. Those are the few challenges that we have. Could be more. Then opportunity is director of the standard development should look on how to shorten the gazettement process. This is in the process. I think my colleague can agree with me that they have a plan on how to shorten the process, but at the end of the day, the Minister of Industry and Trade has to declare. So this is ongoing. Interpretation of some standard, especially in food sector and the chemical sector, especially detergent standard, because most of Tanzanian SMEs are very innovative in food sectors and the detergents, this soap. And then proper handover of the proper handover for the staff who are leaving TBS, so that you.
1 minute.
Okay. Then use of web store to access and sales standards. And then for the recommendation, I can recommend that to have to increase a cooperation between National Inquiry Point and an information center, so as to serve national stakeholder effectively, to have a cooperation, to increase that cooperation. Then conclusion, we can say as an information center, we respond to all inquiries, whether through telephone, fax, email, walking in, we respond. And also we allow researchers and students to come and use the material free of charge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, but I would like to ask you, looking at the recommendation, there is that need of all ARSO member collaboration. As you know, working as an inquiry point, international system link at regional system and sub-regional system. What would you see as the way of collaborating among these different NSB at national level, sub-region and region, which is continental level, and international standard setting bodies? What would be your take on that?
My take on that is to have a good network and coordinate activities between National Inquiry Point and the Information Center.
Yes. Meaning we utilize well the inquiry point and the other.
And the other information centers.
Yeah, thank you very much. From East Africa now we go to Southern Africa. We have Dr. Afcfca, who is the Director General for Standard Association of Zimbabwe, actually the immediate past president of the African Organization for Standardization. Dr. F, we want to know how you reach out to the small guys in Zimbabwe in this information sharing on standards and technical regulation and conformity assessment issues. Dr. F, The platform is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon to you all. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in the ARSO monthly webinar. It is an honor and a pleasure. Yes, indeed, the small guys are very important to us as Zimbabwe, as much as they are to the other countries that I've already presented before me, who have actually made my work a little bit easier, in the sense that my role now is to share a little bit about how Zimbabwe is dealing with the issue of the small guy in terms of promoting TBT and TBT information. In my presentation, I'm really trying to demonstrate that there is a nexus between standards, business membership organizations, or the BMOs, and industry associations. Next slide, please. So my brief presentation is essentially going to be looking at just a brief background, and also I'll then talk to the issue of information required by industry associations, BMOs. What information is it that they actually need? And then the role of the NSB in terms of the information centers, just to underscore what has already been presented, but maybe from the perspective of Zimbabwe, and then I'll conclude. Next slide. So I think we've already heard quite a lot from previous speakers in terms of how Africa is creating one of the world's largest single markets. I think this is the opportunity that is before us that we should all be excited about. That really presents a huge opportunity for the continent in terms of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is set to really take off in January 2020. And I think, as we have heard before, there is a huge potential which accounts to about $2.5 to $4 trillion spending and investment across 55 countries. But who are these people that we are talking about? We're really talking about, our entrepreneurs on the continent, our business membership organizations, our industry associations. These are the people that we are producing standards for. I think very often when we produce standards, we forget whom we are actually producing them for. They are not for the NSBs. They are not for, ASO, but they are for the business people who are, out there, who must therefore be adequately informed and trained in selling their products and services to, the international markets. This is the reason why we exist as NSBs. So the entrepreneurs and the BMOs and industry associations, I talk about these more because as SARS, we work through these BMOs and associations. Actually, our general council is made of about 56 associations whom we service. So they need to be well informed in respect of TBTs, NTBs. They also need to be well informed in terms of export procedures. They want to know information on customs procedures, quality requirements, and also they want to understand the financing facilities that are available for export businesses. And very important now, as has been spoken about by Dr. Edem, is the issue of leveraging on the digitalization and opportunities under the fourth industrial revolution, because this is exactly where we are now as Africa. We are now embracing the fourth industrial revolution, and therefore it's very important that as the national standards body, we need to actually go through this change management process where we used to do things, using the brick and mortar kind of system, but now we're transforming into a digitalized ecosystem. Next slide. So a little bit more background. The information asymmetry has already been spoken to, so I won't talk too much about it, but suffice to say that this information asymmetry is between, what is known by our industry players, the understanding that our regulators have, our policymakers, our traders, both large and small, all of this asymmetry in information reduces competitiveness and access to markets. And this is the area that we really need to work on, I think, you know, as Zimbabwe, and also I think the rest of the continent. So as I said earlier on, there is a nexus between the information required by industry and that which is provided by the national standards body. And this nexus this link is very, very important for us to leverage for the African Continental Free Trade Area. So Africa is on a developmental path, and nations like Zimbabwe are signatories to the WTO World Trading System. And we do recognize that as far back as, you know, the year 2000, 20 years ago, the WTO Technical Barriers to Trade Committee adopted the 6 principles for the development of international standards. And even up to today, we are still upholding those 6 principles because we are part of the World Trading System as Zimbabwe. So next slide, please. So with that understanding, so what are we saying now as we move into the African Continental Free Trade Area? What needs to be addressed is the information gaps for our relevant, you know, entrepreneurs on the continent. And as I mentioned, the importance of those 6 principles as we develop our standards, even as Africa regional standards, we are upholding those same 6 principles of transparency, of openness, impartiality and consensus, effectiveness and relevance, coherence and development dimension. As Africa is you know, it's a developing continent. So these principles are still very key, you know, in terms of how we're going to be producing our standards. And it's important that the National Standards Body, through the Information Center, highlights these principles to the private sector. And the other angle, or I should say dimension or gap that needs to be addressed is the TBT and SPS, which has been spoken about before. And very important is the continental NTB reporting, monitoring, and, you know, eliminating mechanism that has been established in July 2019. This is going to be very important because the NTBs are still going to be there, even under the single market. But now, how do we leverage our information centers to be able to share this information with our BMOs and our entrepreneurs who are out there? How can we support our private sector in terms of how they can reduce costs and improve, you know, the doing business environment, and also help them understand the harmonization and compliance to standards, and also leveling the playing field for SMEs. This is the big task that we have before us. And through our information centers, I think quite a lot can be done. Next slide, please. So in a nutshell, and just to repeat what has already been said, we're really saying that there's need for better coordination and dissemination of relevant TBT information to members, you know, responding to inquiries in terms of standards, and also draft proposals. You know, our private sector, when they ask for standards, they want to know whether there's already a standard that's already in the pipeline. So we need to share that information openly and, you know, full disclosure and transparency. And then certification, you know, providing that information on conformity assessment, including things like testing, you know, calibration, and also pointing them the right direction in terms of our regulations, and where they can obtain these regulations as well. So really providing that one-stop shop, as it were, in terms of the, you know, national needs for our private sector. Next slide. So in a nutshell, in terms of the little guy, going back to the little guy, what is it that we are saying? We are saying that as Zimbabwe National Standards Body, SARS, and you know, the other speakers who spoke before, Tanzania Bureau of Standards and Egypt Organization for Standards, we are saying that we have a responsibility and a mandate to ensure that access to relevant information, which is strategic, is made available for the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And in this regard, ARSO, which is the Continental Standards Bureau, members of the National Standards Bureaus, information centers need to work hand in glove and coordinate very well to contribute towards making standards information available within their countries and within their regions under the framework of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And lack of information available to the private sectors, companies and manufacturers, regulators and government officials and ministries has been identified as a key limiting factor in implementing a single market. So I think the challenge is before us. This is what we really need to be thinking about, is how can we better make TBT SPS information accessible to these stakeholders. And thankfully, thanks to the efforts of the Secretariat, we have seen that ASO has recognized the important role of NSB's information centers and is playing its role in facilitating the access to standards and other TBT NTB information in Africa. In terms of how we can support our manufacturers, our companies, our regulators, and our governments as a whole. Thank you very much. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Gazikwa, for the good presentation. When you are talking about bringing all of us together within this AFCFTA, you talked about one-stop center. How can we bring all these platforms together? How can we link them?
That's a very, very good question, Dr. Himojin. Well, at one end, we have our national standards bodies, okay, who are working with the industry players, the BMOs and the entrepreneurs on the ground. We are on the ground right now. And so our role is really to, submit those plans, work plans to ISO, to ASO, to WTO, and let them know what we are doing. But on the other end, what we have, we've got our mobile money transfer happening there. We've got, letters of credit on the private sector. And therefore, we are saying that we've got to bridge that gap. How do we bridge the gap? That's where the nexus is. The nexus is that link between what we are doing as NSBs. We shouldn't work in a silo. We should recognize that the work we are doing has to impact, the final user, who is the industry player, who is the association, who is the, the SME. And in between those two, we do have, government to government arrangements that have been taken care of through the African Continental Free Trade Area. As we've heard, we've got the Africa Trade Observatory, which was spoken about by Mr. Mreweri. So that is at a policy level. And then at a continental level, we've got the Africa Trade Web Portal. So, the structure is there. It's actually there. So when we say one-stop shop, we are saying, if you're at national level, you've got your NSB with the information center, providing that one-stop shop at national level. If you're operating at a continental level, you've got your one-stop shop there through your Africa Trade Web Portal. And then you've got your observatory at the policy side. So I'm saying this coordination has to be, well understood by the NSBs. And this is the job now of our information center, to understand the full complexity. So can you imagine how we are finding it very difficult to express ourselves? What about the SME, the small guy who is on the street? He's even finding it more difficult. And he also wants to understand what the role of the e-ping is going to be, the pilot, project that's been run. So I think we've got a big task ahead of us as we are kicking off this African Continental Free Trade Area. But I think it's a huge opportunity for the NSBs to play their role to really optimize their role and fully understand the complexities, but at the same time, localize it. I think the challenge is to localize, because we are on the ground and we can share that information with our private sector.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At the end of the day, you are the one playing the big role at the national level. Localize it, have the observatory, localize it, the Africa Trade Portal, localize it, the e-ping, localize it. Before I release you, from our more than 100 participating in this webinar, there is a question of how do we balance increasing volume of technical regulation and the constraint of resources on our SMEs? How do they abide on this technical regulation, the different conformity assessment, the testing? What is your take? How can we reduce this burden from our SMEs?
I think that's a very good question, Imogen. It's a brilliant question, because I think at the end of the day, we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot. One of the things that we have realized is post-COVID, I mean, even during the COVID, we've seen a number of organizations who have been hard hit by COVID. As you know, Africa, we should understand the assumptions. Our organizations are either family-owned businesses or they're SMEs. I would say 70 to 80% are small businesses. So, it's a huge challenge. So the issue really is, the role that must be played in terms of lobbying for ease of doing business reforms. I know in Zimbabwe, for instance, I can tell you that quite a lot of work has been done in that regard in terms of the transitional stabilization program that we've been running, over the past, I would say, 2 years. And now we are moving from stabilizing into developing a national development plan. Because I think there is a realization that once you stabilize, you now need to develop. You cannot continue to be in a mode of stabilization. You now need to move. So one of the things that we have realized from where I'm talking from, there's need for reforms. There's need for reforms of ease of doing business, to make it easier for the SMEs, the family-owned businesses, to formalize their businesses, because there's a lot of informality in Africa. Let's face it. But if we remain informal, we cannot contribute to the GDP. So, my take on this is that there's need for more support to the SMEs, and also a reform agenda, which is, incorporated into the national trade, national development plan, so that, at the end of the day, we have, companies that have a potential to grow, that are more resilient, that are more sustainable, and that can contribute to the GDP. Otherwise, if they remain small, they will not take us far, especially under the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Thank you. Thank you. Reform, put the informal sector to the formal sector. Probably it will help reduce the burden on the SMEs. Adam, there is a question that also came from our participant. How harmonization can promote industrialization?
Well, I think the industrialization is about adding value, taking advantage of the resources that exist, adding value, and being able to now cater for our basic needs. If you look in Africa today, one thing that all the countries have in common is trade deficit. We import way more than we export. You have a country like Egypt importing billions of dollars of wheat from the US, something that could be grown, next door in Sudan. So there's a lot of raw materials that are leaving the shores of the continent, that with just a little value addition. I mean, I take example for the Africa Cotton and Textiles Federation, where I'm the current president, for example. It's a huge amount of money that could stay on this continent if we just industrialize our cotton value chains. But the truth of the matter is that the infrastructure needed to be able to take the cotton out of, say, Kenya, add value, the cotton out of Benin, add value in the looms in South Africa, be able to process it in Kenya, etc., doesn't currently exist. So it becomes much cheaper for you to bring these goods from China, Vietnam, etc., finished products, because they have access to cheap electricity, power, labor, much quicker than we would be able to produce them here. But if you're able to provide that infrastructure, of which digital infrastructure is going to be very key, because you need data, you need to know where exactly your market is, you want to know where the demand is, you need to be able to work on standards, and to be able to be competitive. You can't be competitive without having the right kind of standards. In all of these things, you need access to data information, which digitalization helps to bridge. So part of the reason why other countries are more competitive and be able to produce and add value is because they build infrastructure, which digital infrastructure, because the infrastructure in this day and age is not just about rails and roads and airports. It's also about having the digital tools, because with the airport, even the airports, you can't run an airline industry today without digitalization. You cannot run anything at all without digitalization. So I feel industrialization helps you map out. Digitalization helps you map out your needs, makes you visible to banks, make you able to attract resources, finances, and through that, you're able to aggregate these underlying SMEs that exist in micro entrepreneurs and bring them into a holistic, or if you like, an aggregated force, and build the scaffolding needed for them to be able to move their goods and services to other parts of the continent and eventually the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Harmonization can increase the leverage on soft infrastructure, as you say, and the value addition to our products. Thank you. Thank you, Eden. In 1 minute, Brian, there is a question from our participant. Can Africa enhance harmonization of market entry requirements? Can we do that?
It's quite a challenge, Secretary General, in terms of harmonization of market entry requirements, because market entry requirements also depends on domestic regulations, and domestic regulations, that landscape on its own is so heterogeneous across the African landscape. But however, we would not turn a blind eye to that. What could happen is we could start small, identify commonalities, and where there are sharp differences, we bring the parties to the table and discuss. And maybe over time, we have a common kind of market access concerns for Africans. But let me also bring this attention to you that in terms of market entry, there is an ongoing work in terms of the protocol on investment. That protocol investment sort of like attempts to address the investment regulations per country and harmonize so that we as Africa become a unified investment area in terms of regulations. Thank you, Secretary General.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One last comment in a half second. Sarah, there is a question, what standard should we focus on? Sub-region, region, continental, or international? Or how can you rank the focus in a 30-second, please?
Yes, thank you for the good question. Now, since here I'm sort of representing a bit more the more international perspective, I can recall that under the TBT agreement, to which many of our African Union states are members, there's an obligation to follow international standards to the extent that they are applicable and relevant in a certain context, and are not, and sometimes they may not be suitable for climatic geographical factors. But in principle, I think movement the goal should be towards the international standard, but I know for various reasons there are sometimes differences at the regional level, but to the extent possible they should be kept to the minimum, because ultimately you want to integrate in Africa, have maybe industrialized goods in Africa, but then you'll want to send them over to the rest of the world, and then it will be much easier if globally we are striving towards international standards, even if it's not always possible.
Thank you very much. Meaning we should start from the top. International, if not there, continental, if not there, go down. But we should check always from the top down, if those standards exist, to open up our market. Thank you very much for our speakers. I think you deserve an applause. Yeah, if we were in a physical meeting, probably we should have shared a glass of wine or coffee or tea, whatever we are taking. Thank you for our participants who participated. We still have 120 participants following us, and thank you all for your participation. We're gonna share the presentation to all of you who registered for this webinar. Thank you. See you actually on the 30th, end of this month. We'll be holding another interesting webinar that on education and standards. Thank you very much. If you can put on in 5 seconds your cameras, then we try to have some screenshots. Please smile, put on your cameras, smile while we are taking screenshot of all our participants. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Thank you.
1, 2, 3,
Thank you,
smile.
Mr.
Yes, thank you very much. The screenshots are taken. Thank you. Take care. Bye. Have a nice
Bye.
evening or a nice day for all of you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.